Oh, hello. Do you think that Big Brother's watching? Or that the Illuminati is planning to take over the world? Have you happened to have an encounter with a space alien today? Well, if the answer to those questions is yes, then grab your hat. This is tinfoil hat time. So we're going to be talking about the smart city of the future, and this is from an article that I encountered I encountered it just this week, but it was written about a year ago. And we're going to go ahead and dive into this. And I believe this is the original place from the World Economic Forum. And it's Welcome to 2030. I own nothing. I have no privacy, and life has never been better. Whew, that title freaks me out. So we're going to be talking about a few different talking points. What are the good parts about owning nothing? What are the bad points about owning nothing? I have no good points about having no privacy. We're going to talk about what we do, automation, the required living in such a society, and then we're going to talk about my final stance on universal basic income, because a lot of people have asked me for that in the past. So we're going to go ahead and discuss that in detail. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by reading some of this article, shall we? All right, so there is also an hour-long video. You can watch the discussion from their 2017 annual meeting. But welcome to the year 2030. Close your eyes and welcome to the year 2030, where space aliens will see us in the streets. Oh, wait, hold on. Never mind. Wrong conspiracy. Welcome to my city, or should I say our city. See, this is all ours, people. This is ours. Our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. Let's stop and ponder that last one for just a moment here. I don't own any clothes. Do we share them? Do I know the psycho who has worn my underwear last? Or we just have this bundle of clothes distributed to us, the underwear of our given size. We wear them for a day or 3 or 4, depending on how nasty you are. You take them off and you throw them into this nebulous little hamper at the house you don't even own. You just happen to be staying there that night. And then you just meander on away because there's a cupboard where a robot has come by and put the perfect size underwear for you, and you just grab one and put them back on. And when you're done, wherever you have to be, you take your underwear off and throw them in, and all the underwear is just recycled in society. Have I just made this terrifying? I mean, come on. We don't own any clothes. What do we need clothes for? We don't need appliances. We don't need any of this stuff. We got a smart house, a smart society, a smart city with a smart car, with a smart everything. The place is so smart we can become imbeciles and idiots as we roam through the cities in 2030. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. Windows 10. Excuse me. Yeah. Everything considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, all of the things we need in our daily lives. One by one, all these things became free. So it ended up not making sense for us to own much. First, communication became digitalized and free to everyone, and then clean energy became free. Things started to move quickly. Transportation dropped dramatically in price. It made no sense for us to own cars anymore because we could just call a driverless vehicle owned by that kitty clubbing Uber at any point in time. Or a flying car for longer journeys within minutes. We started transporting ourselves in a much more organized and coordinated way when public transport became easier and quicker and more convenient than a car. Now I can hardly believe we accepted congestion and traffic jams, not to mention the air pollution from combustion engines. What were we thinking? Sometimes I use my bike when I go to see some of my friends. I enjoy the exercise and the ride. It kind of gets the soul to come along for the journey. Funny how things seem never to lose their excitement. Walking and biking and cooking and drawing and growing plants. It makes perfect sense and reminds us of how our culture emerged out of a close relationship with nature. Environmental problems just seem so far away. In our city, we don't pay any rent because someone else is using our free space when we do not need it. My living room is used for business meetings and when I am not there. Once in a while, I would choose to cook for myself. It is easy. The necessary kitchen equipment is delivered at my door within minutes. And since transportation became free, we all stopped having those things stuffed into our home. Why keep a pasta maker or a crepe cooker jammed into the cupboards? We can just order them when we need them. It comes by, drone delivers it to your front door, and then it's dropped off, and then you use it, and you set it back out, and a little drone comes by and picks it up and takes it on back to the appliance factory in the cloud. Oh, such a perfect utopia. I yawn for those days when, man, I have this big bread maker down there, but I don't make bread every day. Why need a bread maker? I'll just go ahead, pick up my smartphone, or I don't even need to pick it up. I just need to telepathically go, order me a bread maker. And they're like, we'll just bring you bread. And you're like, no, I would like the bread maker today. I just want to use the bread maker. Shall I include the flour in the pre-made bread mix for you? Yes. And then it'll come in, and you'll set it right down, and you'll just add some water, and it'll go ping in 30 seconds like that pizza on Back to the Future 2. And then the drone will come and drift away your bread maker back to the appliance factory in the cloud. The cloud. The cloud is just up there. It's just out there. It no longer is a repository for our data. Our cloud is now a repository for our appliances and our artifacts. But let's go on. This also barely made the breakthrough of the circular economy easier. When products are turned into services, no one has an interest in things with a short lifespan. Everything is designed for durability, repairability, and recyclability. I want to stop on that comment because nothing in our society is designed for durability, repairability, or recyclability. Consider these iPhones. You cannot recycle them. They do not fix them. They make them to be, as soon as you have one tiny thing that on any other device was a fixable item, they run it through a shredder, send it to a landfill, and just send you a new one. We don't have anything built for durability. They don't want things to be durability. That's the part of the light bulb conspiracy. If you watch that tinfoil hat time or the accompanying documentary, go check it out. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's called The Light Bulb Conspiracy, talking about planned obsolescence, building weaknesses into the things that we have so that they do stop working prematurely, so we have to throw it away. Because do you remember those times, if you're young you don't, when you had a VCR and it would break and you would take it to the VCR repairman because it was cheaper to get a VCR repaired than it was to buy a new one? Nowadays, a VCR breaks down, and we don't even have those anymore. A DVD player breaks down. We just toss it in the trash and go out to the store and spend another $50 on another one. We don't have any repairability. Recyclability? Yeah, right. Do you know where the computer recyclable factory is in your town? Most people don't. We don't have products built for durability, repairability, or recyclability. We have things built as consumable disposables. The materials are flowing more quickly in our economy and can be transformed into new products pretty easily. Environmental problems seem so far away since we only use clean energy and clean production methods like solar that causes excessive pollution just to produce one panel, that if it lives its lifespan of 90 years, it might break even on the carbon released to manufacture the panel. The air is clean, the water is clean, and no one would dare to touch the protected areas of nature because they constitute such value. I gotta write down another note down here. I'm just gonna leave a big thing down here like this, and we're gonna come back to that point later. No one would dare! Who would dare? Who would dare trample someone? Who would dare write graffiti? Who would dare step on a protected area in a national park? Who would dare any of that stuff? No one would dare do that because nature constitutes such value to our well-being. Sounds like Romans 1. We worship the creation rather than the creator. Let's get back to that one later. In the cities, we have plenty of green space and plants and trees all over. I still do not understand why in the past we filled all the free spots in our city with concrete. The funny thing is all of the projections about these green and smart cities in 2030 are all concrete or glass. The death of shopping, folks. Who needs to do that burdensome shopping? Shopping, I can't remember what that is. For most of us, it has been turned into choosing things to use. Sometimes I find this fun, but now I just let the algorithm do it for me. It knows my tastes better than I do by now. When AI and robots took over so much of our work, we suddenly had time to eat well, to sleep well, to spend time with other people. The concept of rush hour makes no sense anymore since the work we can do will be at any time. I do not really know if I would call it work anymore. It's like thinking time, creation time, development time. For a while, everything was turned into entertainment and people did not want to bother themselves with difficult issues. It was only the last minute we found out how to use all these new technologies for a better purpose than just killing time. They live different kinds of lives outside the city. My biggest concern is for people who do not live and say, we must have compassion on all those people who do not let the algorithm do their shopping for them, who have disposable underwear worn by other people in society, and who have no place to call their own to let their hair let down. That is my biggest concern is for people who do not live in our city, those we lost on the way, those who decided it became too much. All this technology. Those who felt obsolete and useless when robots and AI took over the big parts of our jobs. Big parts of our jobs? How about when the robots and AI took over all of our jobs? Those who get upset with the political system and turned against it. They live different kinds of lives outside the city. Some have formed little self-supplying communities. Others just stayed in the empty and abandoned houses in small 19th century villages. Kind of like The Village. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact I have no real privacy, nowhere I can go and not be registered. 1984? I know that somewhere everything I do, think, and dream is recorded. I just hope that no one will use it against me. All in all, life is good, much better than the path we were on, where it became so clear we could not continue the same model of growth. We had all had these terrible things happening, lifestyle diseases, climate change, the refugee crisis, environmental degradation, completely congested cities, water pollution, air pollution, social unrest, and unemployment. We lost way too many people before we realized we could do things differently. There's an author's note down here. I'm going to read this. Some people have read this blog as my utopia or dream of the future. It is not. It is a scenario showing where we could be headed for better or for worse. I wrote this piece to start a discussion about some of the pros and the cons of the current technological development, and we are dealing with the future. It is not enough to work with reports. We should start discussions in new ways, and this is the intention of this piece. And that is why I want to talk about this tinfoil hat time today, to bring up the discussion. What is the good? What is the bad? Frankly, I think this is downright creepy, but let's go ahead and discuss that in more detail. What is good about us not owning things anymore? And if you some of the clips that particular author had said do make some sense. She's done several talks. One of them, she's like, we don't want the drill. We want the ability to put a hole in the wall. And of course she takes that to that degree and says, we don't want the car, we want the ability to get somewhere. And if that's kind of a slippery slope argument. It really is like, just because the drill function with the hole, I get that, but should we just call Uber and Lyft for transportation? I won't call Uber, they club kitties. No. And so that's the whole matter with that. So And this begged a fascinating question, because as I've been thinking about this week, I actually needed to use my drill. So what happens if I don't have a drill here? Well, if this smart city happened and I could just pick up my phone and say, I need a drill, and then a drill magically comes down, I go out to my drone landing pad, pick up my drill my holes, go put the drill back, and some drone comes by and picks it up. That probably wouldn't be a bad thing, even the concept of a rental. But this is why we have community, and why the IoT is breaking down our community, because it makes us individualistic. So I happen to have multiple friends with drills. So if I really needed a drill and I didn't have one, I could be like, hey, I need a drill. I'm going to come over, get a drill. Okay. And I go over, get a drill, come back, drill my holes, and drop the drill back. And guess what? It produces a time to discuss things and have some conversations with my friend. So there are a lot of things. In fact, one guy, as I've been studying minimalism, one guy who's a minimalist out there, he said, and I forget what the resource was, but this is what he said. He's like, I use Craigslist for my storage locker. He's like, I don't really need to have a drill, but if I need a hole, I just look on Craigslist and find somebody selling a drill. Okay, great. I'm going to go pick up that drill, maybe spend $5 on it, drill my hole, and then turn around and sell the drill back on Craigslist again. And he might even sell it for the same amount or more than what he bought it for. In which case, you get your drill, you do that. Does it take longer? Sure. It's definitely more inconvenient to do that than it is to have a drone deliver it to you, because your brainwave said, I need a hole. So rental is fine in many of those respects. There are certainly things that renting makes sense. Like, for example, a paint sprayer. Suppose I want to paint the inside of my house. I want to do the whole inside of my house. So I, move my furniture out. I have U-Haul drop off a pod in my front yard. I use all my furniture out there. And I'm not going to go out and buy a paint sprayer for $100 when I can rent one for $20. But is that a real big deal? And I start thinking about this more and more as I'm more and more of a minimalist. What do I really need? What is it would be nice to have? And what is it I should just totally get rid of? And so those are some of those questions you ask. So in a society where you do not own anything, there are certain elements to that are good, because maybe I don't need a drill in my house. Like, I have a jigsaw down here. I don't think I turned on the jigsaw for 2 or 3 years. Okay, I have a drill that I used it the other day. Prior to that, I think it was 1.5 years, 2 years before I used the drill. So there's things like that it makes some degree of sense. But when all products have become a service, when everything has become a service, now we have no ownership at all. In a perfect society, that would be awesome. But there's this little fundamental problem. And that fundamental problem happens to be human nature. And we're going to talk more about human nature later, because I'm going to drop that word in several times before we talk about it. So what is not good about a society that doesn't own anything? Well, first and foremost, I think this goes later. First and foremost, owning products is generally cheaper than renting them. If everything is a service, now, is it for free that I pick up my smartphone and go, ooh, I need a drill, and for free some drill comes down and picks it up? Not blimmin' likely. It's going to be a little service fee. It's like Uber's not free. Lyft is not free. Cat taxis are not free. I can right now live in this city, despite I live offside, I can live in this city without a car. I wouldn't want to. In fact, we have very good public transportation here, but I wouldn't want to live here without the car. I just don't. I'd rather just have the freedom at whether it's 10 in the morning or 10 at night. I love the freedom to just jump in there without some company or some person knowing where I'm going. And if I'm that paranoid about it, I'll leave the phone at home or wrap the thing in some tinfoil. Either way works. But owning things is generally cheaper because these are not going to be free. It's going to cost me, 3 Republican Dideras or whatever to rent my drill. And I have to decide, do I rent the drill or do I watch such and such new movie that has come on the streaming service? Because society's not going to be this free and open thing. Because ultimately it comes down to the big white elephant in the room, and somebody mentioned it earlier in the comments. You have this whole smart city. You have drones going all over. They're dropping off appliances. Someone's picking up the laundry. All these types of things. You know what? All of those things are owned by somebody. You know who they're owned by? They're owned by the elite. They're owned by the people who run the companies. They're owned by the governments that run the city. They're owned by somebody. These are not communal items. They are owned items. And renting something is always more expensive than buying something. Well, I guess unless you're an idiot. So somebody owns all this stuff. Somebody is going to make a killing. And this is why DVDs are getting harder and harder and harder to find. Because movie industry wants us on the streaming services. Because although they may make less money for their movie now on a streaming service, you get people addicted to always have the streaming service. And they'd rather have a tenth of the cost for 15 years than the whole cost one time now. And that's ultimately the thing. In this smart city they're talking about, somebody owns all this stuff. Just like somebody owns the drill. Somebody owns the car. Lyft had this big thing. It's getting expensive to own a car. Car ownership is all expensive. And they talk about all of this kind of stuff. Car ownership's expensive. It's expensive. It's expensive. You know what? It's not. Their figures are based on the average American. The average American has a $500 car payment. And that's cheaper than leasing the car in the long run. But if you are intelligent and you buy a car based on your budget, you can buy a car. I bought my car for $6,000, I think 8 years ago. I bought my car for $6,000. I put tires and oil changes into it. I replaced two CV boots, and that didn't take me long, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and a $50 part. You know, the cost of car ownership. Now, of course, we have to talk about insurance, which I only end up paying, $500 every 6 months, and gas, maybe $100 a month. That doesn't come close to $9,000 per year. Not even close. But what's my cost of using Lyft or using Uber or using a cab or using the bus? Minus the fact that I have to call on that. Minus the fact that somebody's tracking where I'm going, what I'm doing, what are my times, what are all these. I'd rather have the car. And frankly, car ownership can be a lot cheaper. You just don't do it like the average American does it. Because the average American is in debt up to their eyeballs. They're living paycheck to paycheck. Then they got debt out the wazoo, hundreds of credit cards, student loan out the craziness. It's not a good situation. And so you have these types of things. So somebody owns all this stuff. We're talking about this perfect utopian society. We don't own all products that become services. And services still cost money. Even if it's just a perceived money. What about sentimental items? Do you guys have sentimental items? I have sentimental items. Now, I try not to have a lot of sentimental items. I try and keep my sentimental items to a minimum. But I have sentimental items. And with these sentimental items, where do we put them? If people are always using our free space, because they talk about, how often are you in your house? Well, if you're a modern, average Western person who goes to a 9 to 5, you spend more time at your job than you do at your house. And of course, it makes sense in that case you're not there during these times, so we're going to use your living room to have a business meeting. Okay, yeah, sounds great. Well, where do you put your sentimental items? Where do you put your sentimental belongings? Where do you put the things that mean something to you, even though they may or may not mean something to anybody else? Where do you put those items that mean something to you? And let's address that last question that they said on this part. Remember this sentence down here? Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact I have no real privacy, nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere everything I do, think, and dream is recorded. I just hope that no one uses that against me. Isn't it a whole lot better to not have all that stuff recorded and not worry about it? My take. That's my take. We all need a private place to let our hair down. We need a private place to turn off from the world. We need a private place to be ourselves and pick our nose and fart. Okay? We just need it. Something we need. And that's the reality, because without that, you become a person in a totally watched society. a totally watched society is a scary thing. They did studies on this stuff, and it makes people crazy. That's the society we'd be living in. What would we do? In this smart city where everyone owns everything, what do we do? And of course, robots have taken over all the jobs. That seems pretty apparent. Drones are going to drop things off. What do we as citizens do? Well, I would say about 70 or 80% of us would be co-opted by the government to redesign all of the constant media programming so that us people are at the whim of the government because, that tends to be what happens. But here's the thing. Now, there is a fascinating book. I'd encourage everybody to read this book. It is called Einstein's Dreams, and I don't think it's right here. No, it's in the other room. I can't remember the author of it, but if you look up the book, it's called Einstein's Dreams. It's basically a physicist who's also just a general fiction author. He writes this book talking about what would society be like if time behaved differently? And it's a series of short essays. What would happen if time stopped and started? What happens if time went on forever? What happens if time went backwards? What happens, So they addressed every possible thing you could do with time. One of those, my favorite story, is what if time went on forever? The whole world would break down into nows and laters, he describes in his book. And the nows would say with an infinite amount of time, people could become an infinite amount of things. They could take the time to be a store owner. They could take the time to be a doctor. They could take the time to be a writer. They could take the time to do all of these types of things. But then there's another class of people called the laters. With an infinite amount of time, they see no reason to rush into anything. And so they are always the people who have the low-level jobs because they're always more focused on having fun and hanging out and the social aspect of the world. And so what happens is you get a societal split based on people's natural inclination to either be productive or not be productive. That's what would happen in this society. Because with everybody effectively having every need and every service handed to them, we have our relevancy as humans in a productive society are gone. We have relevancy when we work as people. Work is what gives a man his pride. When a man loses his job, it is a strike to his soul. And sorry to be offensive, but that's not always the case to that degree to a female. It is a male type thing. It's just one of those male sociology views. Just like more males commit suicide over financial issues, more females commit suicide over social issues, friendship issues, things like that. There are statistics when you actually look at some of these things. And what would happen in this society because of this, and irrespective of sex, because either gender can be a now or a later in this way. But if you have the basic concept of all of your needs being met, and as a productive society, we need to sit back in here and ask ourselves. Now, in the article, they say we have time to be creative, we have time to think, we have time to develop. And I have this fundamental question: to what end are we creating? To what end are we thinking? To what end are we developing? Because we have become useless. And a useless being cannot come up with a use in society. It's a fundamental aspect of who we are as people. We have to have a use. We have to have a reality. We have to have a goal we're moving towards. But in this subjective reality, what would happen is we would turn into people who will either become like the poverty-minded, or we will become like the middle-class minded, or we will become like the wealthy-minded. So this is a book, and I forget the author and even the title of the book. It's a sociology book, and it analyzes the types of behaviors that people have and looks at the three main classes: poverty class, middle class, and upper class. And it says, here's $100. If you give $100 to a person in the upper class, what they will generally do is invest it. And that's not because they're already wealthy and all their needs are met. It's because they've gotten wealthy generally by investing more. So a person who invests more is generally a wealthy person who doesn't invest more. Okay? And yes, there is some argument that they had enough money to invest, but we're going to set that aside. But if you just take these three people, one from each class. You give the wealthy person 100 because they could easily take that 100 and go, bonus, let's go out and buy dinner for friends. But they don't. They invest it. If you take that same $100 and give it to a middle class person, they're going to look through their budget, they're going to look through their bills, and they're going to say, where can I apply this as some need that I currently have? Does this mean I buy extra groceries this month for later? Does this mean I pay off that medical bill that's been nagging me? Where do I put this $100 to help lighten the load on what I do? But if you give $100 to a poverty-minded person, the first thing they do, they go out, they buy a lot of beer and party stuff, and they throw a party for all their friends. It's society nature. Because they're so used to having nothing, when you give them something for free, they just go out and rush out and buy. And that's what would happen in our society. If you give people all their needs met and now give them that free time to be creative and to think and to develop, only a very small fraction of people will actually take the time to be creative and to think and to develop. The majority of your people, you give them all those things, they're going to sit their butt on the couch and watch TV all day. That's what's going to happen. It's just a reality of what's going to happen. So there will be a few people if you gave me a lot of that time, I'd be studying more programming. I'd be doing a whole lot more things. I'd be writing more books. I'd be doing a lot more productive things that I can't do right now because I don't have the income to support me doing all of those things. Okay? But if you gave that to your average person, and a good example is, I have two neighbors here that don't work. One of them is, disabled. One of them is simply elderly. Well, they have an unlimited amount of time. All they ever do is sit there and watch TV. That's a problem. They have an infinite amount of resources. They have all their needs met by either welfare or retirement accounts. But they don't do anything productive. They don't take time to think. They don't take time to be creative. They don't take time to develop. And if you take a society that has no point, you remove any possibility. Because if I'm in this society where everything is communal, I have no incentive to create. At the point in time when everything becomes communal like they're talking about, that is the point in time when progress stops. It's not when religion happens. True Christianity is for progress. But when we get to a society that every need is met and everybody is on a socialist thing, all things are communal, everything is shared, or just this crazy lower class who have this upper class that you can only be born into, a caste system as it were, you have no incentive to produce. You have no incentive to create. And you don't want to find yourself. Because if you find yourself, then you live this horrible existence of knowing what else is out there and being able to do nothing about it. So you sit down and you watch your TV shows like Good Little Boys and Good Little Girls. And let's talk about automation in this crazy new society. Automation. The algorithm gives me what I want. That frightens me. Now, I don't want the algorithm to give me what I want. I want to go out and make my own choices. Now, sometimes my choices might very well be the same. Watch my outdoor philosophy talk tomorrow, and you'll see that kind of playing out. But at the same token, understand that when the algorithm decides for you, then indeed your oven and your refrigerator are going to conspire to make you chicken when you really want lasagna. But what happens is we become so apathetic as a society that we stop, we don't even care anymore, just put food on the table. And when we get to that point of apathy, what happens when the algorithm starts giving us things that we don't really want, but it convinces us that we think we want them because there's an overproduction of that and we have to use it? Price fixing. Scary. What if the algorithm gets taken over and they're like, I want to sell this product instead, and so they start sending you new stuff? They also said everything is registered and recorded. Even your dreams, your thoughts, registered and recorded. Everything about you registered and recorded. When you put on your underwear, registered and recorded. When you took them off, registered and recorded. How frequently you go to the smart toilet, registered, and recorded. How much toilet paper you need, registered, and recorded. When you needed the drill, registered, and recorded. When you have dinner time, registered, and recorded. The house you stay in, registered, and recorded. I love you, big brother. I love you, big brother. Creepy. All right. Let's talk required living. What would be the requirements of living in this society? This is where the rubber meets the road and creepiness ensues. First, how you handle your health is mandated. You must get up at 8 in the morning and exercise. It is time to exercise. Everyone get up at 8 in the morning and exercise. Yeah, that was a trait of 1984. This is the exercise hour. Everybody up, stretch, down, stretch, up, stretch, down, stretch, exercise, exercise. It's good for you. Whatever your stance is on vaccines, that doesn't matter. You're required to take them. You have no qualms. Whether it's the vaccines that have long track records, or those kind of shaky, fairly nebulous ones. It's kind of like, do I want to be force vaccinated by this understudied HPV vaccine? Or would I just rather keep my genitalia to myself until I'm committed to somebody the rest of my life? I'd rather just keep my genitalia to myself, for crying out loud. But no, in such a society, all elements of your health are mandated. You must go to the doctor for the checkup at this time, sir, because if you do not, you are now violating the terms of our agreement, and you might end up costing us more than we think you're costing us because we miss a preventative measure. You must go and get that vaccine. If you can't have it. What about having mandated diets? What if you can no longer eat meat or bacon? Because I got news for you. What's really sad is what almost everything that the government recommends as far as health is actually not healthy for you. Scientifically unhealthy. But what happens in this society when we are mandated health? Because the wisdom of the anointed takes place. There's a book and it's called The Wisdom of the Anointed. I think the book's called that. Anyway, there's a talk by Tom Naughton. He talks about this book and another book, and it is called Diet, Health, and the Wisdom of Crowds. And you should watch that documentary. It is it's a talk, I believe, and you can find it on YouTube. It's by Tom Naughton. It's called Diet, Health, and the Wisdom of Crowds. Do a search on YouTube for that. You will find it. In Diet and Health and Wisdom of Crowds, he talks about the vision of the anointed. And the anointed, of course, is the powers that be. And they talk about the various fundamental things that they do to drive the direction of society. And then he talks about the wisdom of crowds, which is when we move from the vision of the anointed, which was the older pre-internet system, to the internet where everybody could write anything they wanted, it spread the information. Sure, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but there's also a lot of very good information out there. But one of the things that it did is it showed us some of the major flaws in some of the health stuff, among other areas as well. And so a lot of what is talked about as being unhealthy is really healthy. Like saturated fats are very healthy for you. Particularly animal saturated fats, very healthy for you. What are they consider very healthy, like unsaturated vegetable oils? These things are flat out toxic. And those are pushed as those are the healthy alternatives. We are not allowed to serve whole fat milk in schools anymore in America. And whole fat milk is extremely healthy for a kid who, compared to other milks. Milk in and of itself is questionable. But we're not allowed to serve whole fat milk, but we can serve chocolate milk, which actually has more sugar in it than soda. We ban soda because we all know soda's bad. But we serve chocolate milk, which has to be in fat-free milk. It has to be fat-free milk, but that chocolate milk has more sugar in it than this can of soda. But that's the diet in this society you're required, because the duty as a citizen, you are required to eat the food they give you, to take the health advice they give you, and to do everything they give you. It is mandated in this society because that's the way the society works. Mental health is the collective. So if you are declared mentally unstable because you talk about stuff like this and wear a tinfoil hat on a live stream on YouTube, you're just taken away. You're forced to take medicines, and they know if you're taking that medicine because they got a smart tracker to track you taking your medicine. Mental health is a collective problem. We already talked about mandated income or mandated exercise. But this is another fascinating point. They talk about staying out of nature. Got to stay inside our little city. We can't go outside into nature. That's bad. Does Hunger Games ring a bell to anybody? Don't leave the barrier of your district. It's against the law. How dare you go into nature? That's for nature to restore herself. We worship the creature rather than the creation, the creator. Okay? In such a society, we have a ration of food. You can't eat more than they say you can. We have our ration of water. Our smart meter tells us if we're using too much power or not. Is this freedom? This isn't freedom. This isn't freedom. So in light of all this, people have always asked me about my opinion of universal basic income. And here's my official stance. I think universal basic income is a bad idea. Because although it would certainly help some people, it would certainly be a good sounding concept, I think in the long run it would enable more people who do not have more people who do not have motivation to better themselves. It would enable them to just spend the money wastefully. I think it's a bad idea. I think anytime you have universal basic income, you generally have a society that is less motivated, not more motivated, and that's a problem. So what is the ultimate problem with our perfect society where there's no privacy and no possessions and no anything else? It boils down to one word: human nature. There's a movie out there, and it was one of those deeply criticized movies, and it was by M. Night Shyamalan, whatever his name is, the Twisty movies. Not one of his better movies, but it was called The Village. I liked that movie. A lot of people didn't. The reason I liked The Village is the point behind it. You see, if you're unfamiliar with it, spoiler alert, there's a spoiler coming. If you're unfamiliar with that movie, it is this village, and they're living in this society, and it's old society, 1800s probably, whatever else. And they're going through, and they have no crime, no heartaches. Everyone grows their own food. Everyone lives in this perfect communal society. They all go to church. There's the town elders that handle everything. It's that kind of stuff. But one of the kids, who is a mentally disabled kid, ends up stabbing another person in the village. And then it comes out that they're not in 1800s. They're in the modern day. They're living in a preserve. And one of the people has to leave the preserve and go out and get medicine and bring it back. The reason I like this movie isn't because the twist was awesome. I frankly thought the twist was pretty cool. They fooled me the first time I watched it. Second time, though. But the twist in the movie is they were trying to produce a perfect utopic society, devoid of crime, devoid of problems, devoid of possession, devoid of all of these bad things in our society, and someone still got stabbed. In fact, I played an Adventures in Odyssey that, for you people that watched this recording live, you got a chance to hear it. I'm editing it out of this one for copyright reasons. But another Adventures in Odyssey episode is when Eugene and Nathaniel are talking about how you can solve the world's problems. If the whole world would just get together, they could solve world hunger. They could solve wars. They could solve all these things. And Eugene takes him through a trip in the imagination station back to an ancient time and says, I used to think that mankind could all get together and talk about doing all this stuff and produce the perfect society, but there was an element that was missing. So he's like, well, what is it? So they go back in the imagination station to the Tower of Babel. And in the Bible, the Tower of Babel was the time when all of society was united. They spoke one language. There were no wars. There were no challenges. And everyone was a slave. They were all a slave to build the tower in Babel. All right. The element that Nathaniel was missing, and the element that this article we talked about is missing, is human nature. It is human nature to seek ourselves. It is human nature to use others as tools. It is human nature to want to injure other people for our own betterment. It is human nature. It's not always what we want to do. It's not always what we like to do. But it is the core and the nature of humankind, as in my opinion, we fell when Adam and Eve fell in the garden. That's my take on it. That's my take on all this. This future society cannot happen because human nature will not allow it. That is my take on this required future smart city. It can't work. Can't work at all. We will not stay out of the nature. We will not be kind to each other. We will find ways to overcome the technology. We will find ways to steal. We will find ways to kill. And in this society, someone owns all this stuff. And those people are using all of the little minions in the smart city as their little tools. They're stepping stones to stand on, to gain wealth. And they're the only ones that have privacy. And they're the only ones that have possessions. And all the rest, we can all talk about how wonderful it is and nobody has any possessions except the guys at the top. They've got possessions. They've got the wealth. They've got the freedom. And they've got the privacy to do the things you don't do because human nature.